public comment. Public comment, if anybody would like to discuss any items that are not on the agenda. Go ahead, Chapin.
Hi, I just wanted to share that I had talked a little bit to staff and raised to Megan the interest that I had in asking some of the people who had, there were like 75 already people who signed a letter about building height, many of whom were very thoughtful and people I respect a lot. And I had wanted to respond to them by having some kind of forum where we could sort of bring them through the process that we went through to get where we got, and also to hear them. It bothers me that, say, in the article in the Observer on Thursday, it refers to that we are allowing buildings of 87 feet because that's the tip of a peak, and there's still a misinterpretation by so many people out there. So I wanted to share that I'd asked that, and that Megan said, let's not do that now. And I respect her decision as our chair, but I wanted to know that there is that interest, and I'm hoping to find some way that we can sort of bridge the gap with some of those folks. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chapin. Yeah, I feel like a bit with having form-based codes so freshly approved that let's sit on it for at least a couple of weeks, particularly as we have these other things banging on our door. Hi, Shayla, welcome. We're just getting started.
Great.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm late.
No worries. Other comments for the public or commissioners that are not related to the agenda items? All right, let's go ahead and have a look at the minutes then. Were there any corrections or additions that anybody wanted to make?
I didn't have any comments, but I didn't see the October 17 or 18. Sorry, a minute.
We didn't have a meeting.
Oh, okay, perfect.
That's why there were no minutes. Yeah, I forget why. So
We were all
gone.
gone.
You were gone, right?
Yeah, the municipal thing. So I had no issues with the minutes as they have been typed up, and so I'll move that we adopt them as presented.
Hey, do I have a second?
Second. Kate.
Kate. Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes as written?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we don't have everybody. Okay, now we can see everybody. Okay, let's do that again. I'm sorry. If you have a hand up, that's fine. We caught it. Chapin, I heard aye. Ellie, I didn't see your vote.
Aye.
Okay. I will abstain. Sorry, are there any nay votes? I think that we have used up all of our commissioners. I'm going to abstain because I wasn't here. But thank you to whoever took the minutes because they were super helpful and made me feel like I was right here with you, even though I was really in Italy having gelato. And amazing pasta.
Go ahead, rub it in.
Yeah, right. Okay, so thank you for that. So minutes are approved. And our next task is to have a look at the Glazer specific plan logistics memo. And are you guys going to talk us through that? Okay, good.
Yeah, so on October 4th, the Planning Commission made an initial determination that a substantial benefit may result from the specific plan and authorize the application to move forward to the next step, which is community meeting. So the community meeting will take next week or next meeting on November 15th, so 2 weeks from tonight. And the purpose of the community meeting is to have a brief overview from staff, a presentation from the applicant to the public about their proposal. And after the community meeting, the planning commission would choose on their next steps. If you guys move it forward, there's still a lot of process up ahead after community meeting. One of which would be to make a decision again that a substantial benefit could result from the application. In this instance, they're proposing open space as the substantial benefit. And the commission would also have the option to establish an advisory committee. We're setting up the November 15th meeting to have the community portion from 7 to 8:30 and then regular business from 8:30 to 9. If you do choose to move it forward on the 15th, we're not recommending that you establish the advisory committee or the charge that same night. Give you guys 2 weeks to debrief, give us as staff that time to come up with a community charge based on whatever's discussed at the community meeting and whoever is showing interest in being on the advisory committee. So you would come back to that on December 6th, establish a committee, the charge, and set a deadline. The proposed timeline is what we've included in the FAQ document. So if anybody is interested on serving the advisory committee, they have an idea of their time commitment. The advisory committee would meet on Thursdays, 5 to 6:30 if you do move this forward, and would meet 1 to 2 times a month. So far, we have found potential volunteers from the Development Review Board, the Conservation Commission. Someone would need to be selected from the Planning Commission to be on this advisory committee. And then there would be 1 to 2 representatives for the people in the affected neighborhood and the community at large. I do want to make a note as well about official map. So the select board approved form-based code and the official map on October 4th. That became effective on the 25th. And that official map strengthens the existing language in the bylaw, section 13.7, requiring connectivity between neighborhoods. And the map shows a desire for north-south and an east-west connection from the Glazer property to the abutting properties. So this is something that could be incorporated into a future committee charge for the applicant, staff, and committee to work on.
Emily, can I jump in for just a second?
Mhm.
On what you're showing on the screen right now, and thank you, by the way, for your very clear write-up of this process and where we stand. On that map, you mentioned in the text the dashed line that's along Mountain View Road and also the lines that represent potential grid streets. You didn't mention the dotted line that's at the bottom there, the blue dotted line at the bottom, which is actually the connection that I'm the most interested in, which is from South Ridge and North Ridge through to a path through there. And so that's different from the one that might go along Mountain View to basically to get to Old Stage as close to connecting to what currently is built all the way through half of North Ridge.
Right, yep, that's a good point, and that's something we talked about on October 4th as well. So this blue dashed line is running just north of Windridge Road. Windridge Road, then there's another private property, I believe this might be owned by the Savages, before it connects over to North Ridge.
And just at that meeting, we also noted that you can see a little above that on the left side, the North Ridge development. And there's a right of way apparently on the north end of it that was included on the Glazier's map. That you can see it looks like a road, but it's really a path at the very top of that development right there, yes. So they were wondering whether that connection would work. And if we looked at that, I just wonder how we connect that down to what's at the bottom end of North Ridge. So the bottom line is just, I want to make sure that we pay attention to the connection at the south end of this property, not just the one at the north end. Thanks.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that we can incorporate into the advisory committee charter. Hi guys, welcome to the Planning Commission meeting.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing very well. expected you'd have a lot of people here, but it's all online, right?
Yeah, we have some folks online as well. Right now, we're talking about the Glazer specific plan that's gonna have a community meeting next week.
Okay.
I got a comment in the chat from Ruben about a question about the survey results. So part of the outreach for the community meeting has involved sending butters letters to the surrounding property owners. With included in that a butters letter is a survey. So they have the paper survey. This survey is also linked on the town website. It was linked in our Planners Corner newsletter. The purpose of this survey is basically to get people's input, questions, comments. Staff can receive them in advance, and then we can provide, an FAQ before the community meeting, answering some of the most common questions and being prepared to discuss them in the meeting. It also gives folks an option to let us know if they're interested in serving on the advisory committee. I think so far we've received 12 survey responses, digital and paper.
Do you folks want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. My name is Dan Boomhauer, 4545 St. George Road.
I'm Roberta Tracy, 4545 St. George Road.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Megan Pope, I'm the planning commissioner chair, and our other planning commissioners are online. You
Hello.
can see their names up there. And then, I don't know, do you know these? folks?
Matt Blanchet, planning director. with Matt.
Oh, yes.
And
Okay.
Emily
And
Heyman.
Emily, yeah.
Just making sure, I don't like it when people are sitting in a room thinking that
They know
nobody
each
knows
other.
who they are or whatever. No worries. Okay. So planning commissioners, questions about this, the memo and the logistics? What kinds of questions do you have? Tell your friends. Survey is open.
I don't have any questions. I think it's pretty clear. I wasn't there at the meeting when we voted on the moving it forward, but I do want to move it forward in large part to just hear what the community has to say.
Okay, thanks, Sheila. Just as a quick temperature check, is anybody pondering possibly having an interest in being the planning commissioner on the committee? Should we go in that direction? You don't have to say anything right now, but just can you think about it? Think about your winter schedule, your interest in participating, all those kinds of things. Okay. All right, any other comments or questions about logistics? Okay, Emily's doing some kind of magic thing here.
Just to make sure we can see.
Oh, yeah, that's actually
Yeah.
super helpful.
See everybody who has their camera on.
Yeah, or just names even, that's
Yeah.
great.
There we go.
All right, well, if there are no additional questions, we are ahead of schedule. So I think the next piece is for debriefing home-based code.
Sure. So first off, since it's been a while since we've all met and talked about the form-based code, in fact, it's been since the select board's vote to adopt and the subsequent 21-day period during which a petition to repeal could have happened, ultimately didn't. This is the first meeting of the Planning Commission since the form-based code was formally adopted. And, just a brief moment once again to thank all of you Planning Commission members for your very hard work on this project over the last 2.5 years. It was an incredible amount of work. I spent some time today reorganizing the digital files across the entire project. And also some time today going through the application checklists that we've been working with Jeff Farrell to update and looking at the degree of clarity and specificity that is reflected in there, and the building and site design standards that were adopted. And as I'm reading them, remembering hours and hours of this group debating the finer points of so many of the development standards that are now effective. And Emily and I were chatting about something to do with flat roof buildings. And we were looking at a picture of one that I had taken a picture of in New York that I didn't really like. And Emily said, yeah, it has no nice cornice on the top. And it led me to look at the town's cornice requirement for flat roof buildings in the code, including 1/15 of building height in both cornice height and depth, meaning there's a projection out. And then looking at the pictures that were statements of intent in the code that went right back to that visual preference survey, and really seeing how that public process played out into this very, very detailed final product that really is going to matter in terms of how things built under it look and feel for the community. So there's a great deal of credit due to this group for toughing it out through all of those kinds of conversations over the 2.5 years that you worked on it. So thank you. Logistical update, we put a couple of links on your web agenda. We do have a place on the town website, number one, where the code exists as a new appendix to the Unified Development Bylaw. And also a page where we will keep track of the work of the project review committee that was established under that appendix. So myself, the public works director, and the fire chief or designee from those departments will be forming that committee at the point that there's an application for us to review. Application materials, once they're ready for review, will be posted here on the website. We'll also announce their presence through the My Taft Corners site, which we'll keep live for at least another year, just because we've been telling people to go there to look for Taft Corners stuff for some time.
We have
Wanna
to go
keep
to
that.
license for another year.
Yeah, this is subscription's good for a year. And we really do want to make sure that folks in the community know when things are applied for. It gives us an opportunity to explain some of what that process looks like and some of the things they might be seeing design-wise in those applications that come directly out of the code. So that said, no applications to look at yet. We will keep this group updated as well if something comes in, so that you'll know about it and can have kind of a front row seat to how the elements of the code work to shape those new projects. So again, thank you. And we're doing a whole lot of things internally around setting up smooth and efficient administration of the code now, making sure that we can staff it effectively. And that's really what we've transitioned to there.
Two quick things about that. First of all, because I wasn't here, I watched the select board meeting, not every moment of it, but not every minute of the 3 hours, but from October 4th, but particularly the end, and listening to the select board members' summaries of why they were voting, why they, the way they were. And I found that very kind of energizing, really great to hear the level of care and preparation that they all went through in listening to community members and in really diving into the form, into the code to understand form-based code and what it would mean. So I really appreciated watching that. It was very, really one of the more powerful moments of select board meetings that I've observed. The other thing I was going to ask is whether, particularly maybe the first couple applications that come in under form-based code, if there was a way to also maybe, like put it in Planner's Corner, kind of push it out a little more, just so that we can demonstrate how that's going. I think that would be really helpful. And My Taft Corners is a great website, but you have to actively go to it. And so having it pop up in Front Porch Forum or something like that is really super helpful. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, we
great.
can do that for sure. And we're also trying to think about, we're limited in our town website, but structuring it differently. So right now, Development Review Board, for example, is structured chronologically, but we've started to put application items. So like you can look at the whole year and hit Control F and find what you're looking for.
Great.
Rather than going chronologically, we're gonna go project-based, so you can see location, address, and description, and people can more visually understand, oh, what's that thing going in on Talcott Road or whatever, they can zoom to it.
That's really helpful. Yeah, I like that approach.
And then that would parallel well with how it's put out on Planners Corner and posted.
Okay, great. Anybody else have comments or questions about form-based code specifically? Okay, great job, everybody. Okay, we're just plowing through our agenda. Energy Committee memo regarding the capital budget.
Sure. So I hope folks maybe had a chance to at least skim through this memo. It's prepared by the Energy Committee, and as you can see, it goes to the Planning Commission, but it's also been sent to the town manager, finance director, and other members of our department here. And this is not an unfamiliar topic for the Planning Commission. As I think all of you have been through at least once, the Planning Commission reviews Williston's capital budget proposal each year and is required or enabled under state law to comment on the compliance of the capital budget or the conformance of the capital budget to the town plan, to the comprehensive plan. That commentary in the last many years has been almost entirely focused on the ways in which the capital budget does or does not comply with the energy goals that are embedded in the town plan, in the energy plan. So the Energy Committee is aware of that and prepared this list of recommendations in the budget to talk about some of the areas they felt in the capital budget could be focused on or amended or prepared in a way as to further the goals of the energy plan. So I guess for the Planning Commission, number one, you'll be seeing a capital budget presentation from the manager's office, probably at one of your two December meetings, either the 6th or the 20th. This is sort of a preliminary commentary that I think commission members would find a lot of familiarity in things they've been saying in the past. Melinda Scott and I have had a couple of conversations with the town manager about preparing his presentation to the Planning Commission in a way that addresses some of the points made in this memo. And I'll give you just a brief example. There's this commentary at the bottom of your screen about vehicle fleets and moving to a more electrified vehicle fleet. And while I can't say we've bought any electric vehicles for the town, I can say there's a more nuanced story behind that. So the town has about a 50% price advantage in the purchasing of vehicles by using the state bid system. What that does also mean, however, is that we're only limited to buying vehicles that are within that system. Recently, this fiscal year, we had it in the budget. We have it in the budget to purchase a vehicle for the stormwater coordinator, which does not need to be a big pickup truck. Great opportunity to go with a greener vehicle. And in fact, there was a plug-in hybrid, I believe, available through the state bid system, a Chevy Equinox. We ordered it from the dealer. Great, we're making strides. The dealer calls back a couple of weeks later. I'm sorry, I can't get any of those. The money's in the budget. The coordinator needs a vehicle. A conventional gas Chevy Equinox now sits in the town hall parking lot. At least it's not an F-150. We bought a smaller vehicle. But my point being, not for the lack of trying. And there's some other things like that I've talked to the town manager about, just trying to bring not excuses, but some nuance to that conversation about how the town approaches some of these challenges. And especially, short-term cost increase versus long-term savings and how we work all that in. So early warning, managers very much aware of this desire in the capital plan to move towards compliance with the energy goals. And I think we'll have a little more to say about where we're headed on a number of these items when you see either him or the finance director in December.
So I have a question. Oh, it looks like Chapin has a question. You go ahead first, Chapin.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to comment that the request to just have 2 charging stations, level 2 chargers in the town hall parking lot project surprised me. Because the police have already said that they're ready to have chargers for future police vehicles. And it would seem to me if we are putting in a new parking lot next to town hall, 2 is a very small number. So I also realized reading other materials that we could be putting into our policies that any new construction or new parking lot must have a certain percentage of spaces wired for, or at least conduit in place, which would be called charger ready as opposed to charger supplied. And so I think they miss saying something about that, and it may fall to us to do something about that. When I think about Taft Corners, if somebody's putting in a new apartment building, they should really have the conduit in place. I've seen the statistics, but the cost of putting it in after versus before, and it's just incredibly different. And if we look ahead to our goals, we're going to have mostly electric vehicles in the road in 20 years. And so I feel like we need to do more in that area. And I just wanted to strengthen that part. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I had, does anybody else have questions? No, I have a couple. So one of my questions was, how did the Energy Committee get a hold of a multi-year capital budget planning scenario? And yet we never get a chance to see it before December.
They're looking at last year's.
Oh, okay, and they're kind of scoping forward.
Correct.
Anticipating and so forth. It's not based on an actual plan.
Correct.
Okay,
So what you see there, the link to
Oh,
FY
okay, I
23 to 28, that's the fiscal year we're in now,
mhm,
plus 4. So this is the one that was prepared last year.
okay, right. So this leads to my next question / request, which is once again, that the earlier the better for us to see the capital budget plan. And I think that there will be a town-wide groan if there's not a second snow sidewalk plow in there. So that's just, those are my little requests for heads up.
I believe that is in there. I don't know if it's in there for FY 24. I'll have to look.
It's been in there for multiple years and keeps getting pushed out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we're, I think, at the limit. Okay.
What we could do, Matt, that would be pretty quick and easy, is the FY 23 through 28 as like other business at the end of the November 15th meeting, and just pull out some of the highlight things.
Yeah.
Because the Energy Committee made the assumption that a lot of it's gonna stay the same over the next
Yeah.
5 years, so just a
Right.
refresh on the current one.
Okay.
And we can probably call out some of the key pages to look at.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, that would be great.
Yeah, definitely. I know Shayla's a big standard bearer for the earlier the better with the capital budget plan review. Especially if we wait till December 20th and then,
Mhm.
so, okay. Any other questions or comments about this?
I had a question.
Sure.
If you were to go with Chapin's concept of having this part of the form-based zoning for Taft's Corners, would you have to change any of the bylaws or anything else that you've already passed for the form-based zoning to put that into place?
Yes, there was an entire package of amendments to almost all 46 chapters of the existing zoning bylaw in order to fit the form-based code in.
So to make to put in so that when any of these buildings are created in the future, they would have to have the conduit in place for this. Would that be yet one more change you would have to make?
It would be, but I'll note that since 2020, the Vermont Commercial Building Energy Standards have required EV charge facility accommodations. So there may already be a requirement out there that is going to cover most of this.
For residential.
Uh,
Well-
Commercial buildings, so multifamily residential or
Okay.
commercial.
Okay,
So it
Okay,
wouldn't,
so-
wouldn't cover single family or duplex, but
Mhm.
it would cover everything else.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean the town might not want to go in and make a suite of energy related bylaw amendments. And that is something the Energy Committee is also working on with Melinda is, sort of a slate of energy focused bylaw amendments that could come to the Planning Commission eventually in the next year or so.
I'd like to add that I have seen that commercial building code that went into place, and its percentages aren't high enough in my view, but it's a step in the right direction.
all right. Sounds good. Any other comments? Okay, so now we are moving on to the Taft Corners designated growth center 15-year report.
Mhm.
Megan, do you want us to just sort of informally say we support these, we support what the Energy Committee is saying?
Oh, was that up? Do we need to take a vote on
We-
that? or we-
No, it's not a voting item. I just wondered if we wanted to make sure staff knows that we're supportive if we are.
Well, I mean, we are the ones who approved the energy plan and empowered the energy committee, so. Yeah, I guess that was implicit, but you're right. Just, and we haven't had any critical comments, but does anyone not support this and would maybe like to roll things back? Or are we in consensus for supporting the capital budget recommendations? I guess I wasn't really thinking that we would go line by line because it would require a level of education for all of us
No.
that we don't have. And the Energy Committee has been spending a lot of time on that. And so, given that we approved the energy plan and we empowered the Energy Committee, I feel confident in what they have shown us, and I feel like that's a good faith effort. Does anyone have different views or more nuanced view? Okay. Great. All right. Thanks, Chapin. So, Taft Corners designated growth center, 15-year report.
Mhm. So every 5 years, we do a report to the downtown board about our growth center designation. The form-based code area is a small, a portion, not all of the growth center, but most of the growth center. Pretty much the area that it excludes is the big boxes, Home Depot, Walmart, and then the Allenbrook School and some of the Brennan Woods neighborhood.
And the annex project.
And the annex project. Yeah, that is true. So what I wanted to focus you guys on in the report is towards the end, and it's the permit data for the past 5 years. That shows how many structures and dwellings and enterprises were created in the growth center versus outside of the growth center. 76% of the dwelling units in the past 5 years were created in the growth center. The remainder were outside. What's interesting is that some structures and enterprises are created outside of the growth center are associated with the industrial zoning district west. So we're not seeing all of our new growth and development in the growth center, but the majority of dwelling units are. And most of the new structures and enterprises outside are associated with the Robert subdivision, which was an outlier in its own regards when the Robert property became 9 lots that are now U-Haul, and then a couple of industrial commercial buildings on Shunpike Road. More fun version is the map. This is showing new residential. The bigger the house, the more units in that house. So the apartment buildings in Taft Corners versus the little tiny houses are single family homes or clusters for Creek's Edge and Northridge. And in terms of new enterprises, the bigger the box, the bigger the footprint or finished floor area. So this also includes the police barracks and state park and ride that are happening just south of exit 12, showing that a little commercial activity happened in the past 5 years. You know, this data started in 2017 and does include the pandemic, which definitely put a gap in growth. There was a moment of freeze there. Another important thing to note in our growth center designation, there were some findings and conditions about the transportation connection between the growth center and the village. Unfortunately, during the cycle, Green Mountain Transit did away with the village route. So one thing our report addresses is that we are looking into microtransit. Melinda probably can speak better to this than I can, but looking at here's the map. The potential for microtransit connection, not only to connect Taft Corners to the village, but rural parts of the town as well. That's a V-Trans grant to do a feasibility study as to, okay, what would it be, where would it go, how much would it cost, who would it serve, etc.
And I'm sorry, but I'm trying to read that. I missed this map on the PDF.
Yeah, so this map shows the Green Mountain Transit lines in purple and green, and the blue line is the bike path.
The
So
existing bike
the
path.
existing
Okay.
bike path.
So this isn't aspirational.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, this is current.
Okay, and I'm sorry, if I missed it, is there an aspirational one in this report, or are we scoping those things out or not for this document?
There's no aspirational maps yet. That'll probably be part of whatever feasibility study comes out of the microtransit project.
And for bike path, keep in mind that a connection between the village and Taft Corners is a circumferential highways alternative project. It's in the transportation improvement plan, but it is not scheduled. There's been quite a bit of growing discontent among the Circ Alternatives communities that Circ Alternatives projects have not moved forward. In Williston, that involves portions of the Trader Lane project, bike path here, and Mountain View Road widening and bike lane project between the end of the existing path and Route 2A. So some of you are who are the transportation impact fee update project. We put some money into both of those under the theory that we're not supposed to have to spend any money on either of them, but that if we did, we might be able to get things moving.
Right.
I'll give you a short update about some Route 2 stuff that's happening a little later that I think may give us an in, at least on the village to Taft Corners connection. But that's where we are right now. And in the context of this report, a lot of what the downtown board is looking for is, number one, are you meeting your commitments that most of your new development will happen in your growth center over the lifespan of the 20-year lifespan of the designation? And are you doing the things that support, make the growth center supportive of the rest of the town? And the big one in Williston was keeping it connected to the village.
Chapin, go ahead.
I just thought, since this is a report to the state, right, about the growth center, I wondered if we should at least have a sentence in there about what V-Trans did, widening bike lanes along Route 2, because for me, as somebody who sometimes bikes between the village and Taft Corners, what they did, especially eliminating the third lane going up Church Hill and making wide bike lines going up and down there, has basically opened up the option to bike between the two safely as a commuter type lane. And so to me, that they have helped us connect the two a great deal. There we go. Oh, wait. Yeah, so it is in there.
Right in there.
I guess I read it too fast. Because that's very significant to me and reduces the need for a dedicated bike path there. Because to me, a dedicated bike path would be more recreational. If you're a commuter, what's available now is pretty good. If you have children or are sightseeing, the path that's shown there in blue is not very direct and goes onto streets. And that's what I'm hoping we can make better. Okay. Sorry, I missed that. I really liked how much stuff was connected. There was a summary of a whole lot of stuff in this document.
That's great. Any way we can put in a plug for them actually sweeping that lane once in a while?
So again, I want to talk about these two V-Dreads projects, but let folks finish up with
Yeah, that's fine.
growth there. 'Cause
Sorry,
it's a
just a
short
tangent.
tangent.
Personal vendetta. All right. Okay, so are we finished with that? Any comments, feedback?
Is this somewhere, I just think it is, I know we passed form-based code, so it happened, but I think it is really helpful, Emily, to see those maps and to see how clearly it's working, that the zoning is working and that the growth is happening where we want it to be happening. And, I just, I want to make sure that that's really, I don't know if that goes in a planning corner. I don't know. I just would love the people of Williston to know that and see that. It is reassuring, I think, to see those maps.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Shayla. I also think that, it's a lot of people I talk to aren't even aware of the growth center designation, that it even exists or why. And so reinforcing that with the public is such good communication and kind of explains like the logic behind a lot of what we do, including form-based code. But that would be great. We can.
Sounds good. We meet our next Planners Corner article.
All right, there it is.
We have an idea now.
All ready to roll.
Also, this document has the best explanation of our sewage capacity and use of anything that I've ever read. It explains it better than anything we've had in front of the select board as they consider sewer capacity. And so I'd like to be able to refer back to it. There, that chart, for instance, showing that even as we are adding homes, that our usage sagged and has basically been flat for the last umpteen years.
And sewage service area is another thing that people don't know about. So again, that would be, even though it's quite mundane on some levels, but it's important for the town.
Yeah, I think that might have a smaller audience.
Yeah,
I agree that it's important.
Unless we're talking to 8-year-old boys, right? They're
But
very, very interested in those kinds of topics.
But for me, as somebody who lives well outside of the growth center, and having the growth center is a godsend, and having the sewage center area in that area, so that it really helps to limit what types of growth can happen in other places. Without that, this whole town would be looking like just one big piece of urban sprawl. So those things, I agree, need to be as clear to as many people as possible, because they are what make Williston what it is now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, that's a great point, that it's not just the growth center, it's what's preserved the rest of the town
Right.
because of the growth center.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And not to dwell too long on the effluent of the affluent, but I think it's important for people. It was stated in the arguments about form-based code that how are we going to handle all the sewage from all these apartments and stuff. And I just think it's good for the more people that have an understanding of right now we think we have 27 years worth of capacity. And that's with very conservative projections. If you look at what's our projections were in 2005, we would be out of sewage capacity today. You know, I think this is important information for the public to have somewhere.
Yeah, I think Shayla brings up a good point. Like we staff and planning commissioner could draw the zoning maps and these town policies in our sleep.
Right.
But for the general public, like keep reiterating some of these basics, even with the surveys we received for the Glazer application. It's like, how will the town handle water and sewer? And like reminding people that we do budget it and think about it thoughtfully and allocate it to different uses.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for all the work going into that. It's really helpful to see.
Yeah, I'll just echo what some commission members said, and you know, that report is something that we've typically just prepared and gone to the downtown board and made sure that the growth center designation was renewed, but we've not really shouted it from the rooftops. And we've really tried over the last couple of years to do a lot more public information and public engagement, because what's really at the core of good planning is engaging with a community of informed decision makers. And informed is really important, and it's really on the staff to create that informed populace and then engage them about the issues that are coming the town's way. And I will say that both growth center boundary, sewer service area boundary, I expect to say something in the next town plan, like over the 8 years that plan is in place, there is likely to be greater pressure to expand the boundaries of the sewer service area into land that is currently zoned agricultural, rural, residential, and not on sewer. And question to the town, is there interest in considering that? And my guess is the answer from most of the town will be no, absolutely not. We like having an ag rural zone. We don't want to have the same kind of development out to the very borders of the town. But what's really going to help the town, should that question be asked, is a town plan statement that says, yes, we really thought about that, and here's our answer. And there are a whole bunch of issues the town plan addresses like that. So that's one thing. I had one other thing about follow up to form-based code. One of the memos that I need to sit down and write is mostly to the select board, but also to the rest of the community, which is, what are all of the other things we need to work on that were talked about in the Taft Corners vision plan that aren't really part of zoning but need to happen? And a few of those are already in motion. One is the work on the public works specifications for the more walkable, bikeable streets that are required by that code. They need to be in the select board policy. Lisa Schaffler in Public Works is working on that, and we did have the consultant work done to draw those street sections. We have a feasibility study underway to consider the idea of locating a transit station at Maple Tree Place on lands owned by the town. So we're looking at physically whether dimensionally that land can support that use. We're talking to Green Mountain Transit about whether it makes sense within their routing. We will look at projected demand, et cetera, and really end up with something coming out of the feasibility study in writing about, hey, we've owned this land since 1993 that we said was for a transit center or park and ride or both. Do we really mean it? And is it feasible to do that? So that's one. We have work going through the Regional Planning Commission Unified Planning Work Program about trying to encourage some more coordinated design of stormwater treatment facilities in the growth center, because handling it individually on every site is going to be very expensive, and it's going to break up the development pattern that the vision plan wants. There's a lot of advantages for the private sector in thinking about working together and coordinating on stormwater and coordinating with the town, because any new streets that are built will also generate stormwater. So that's another one. Microtransit feasibility study, Emily mentioned, this is a new development, but we did get a thumbs up to perform that feasibility study in FY24. Chapin, I know, and maybe a few others of you are familiar with the pilot that was conducted in Montpelier. So,
I should probably, I'm still GMT alternate. Amy Brewer is the representative, but we found out later that the next step was only available to rural communities. And so then and they've chosen St. Albans for that. But so it's then the thing after that, which will be a regional analysis, which would include us.
yeah. So we're moving forward with that, and we're putting into our budget the grant match we need in order to support that. The last thing as we were talking about bike path connection between the village and Taft Corners, two things that are form-based code and growth center adjacent. One is there's a planned full tear out and reconstruction of Williston Road from Maple Tree Place, where the last project ended, to the Richmond Town line. That's planned for 2027 or 28. And VTrans and CCRPC, in partnership with Williston and Richmond, I think, will be conducting a corridor study about what are the challenges and opportunities related to a project of that size. So we're talking about a full rebuild of the road. It's going to start in Taft Corners and come all the way through the village. It's a great time to talk about the bike facility configuration up the hill, on street, off street, I think could be reopened for discussion. Drainage issues along the sidewalks here in the village are certainly something we highlighted, and more. So
We
that's
bury the
coming.
power lines.
Jacob's
favorite
doing
topic.
if you're doing all that digging, doing a project that at least anticipates eventually burying the power line, something that's been in the village master plan since like 1989. So those are just the things that are on our mind as staff, as we've got a kickoff meeting coming up Friday with VTrans and RPC on that. The other RPC project, following on from a little bit of technical assistance we got last year, CCRPC and VTrans are going to be doing a pilot study about Class 1 highways. This is when the town or a town takes over control of a current state highway. One of the major challenges in Taft Corners is we are divided by two state highways. The vision plan considered very much sort of humanizing those roads with better bike and walk facilities, street parking, traffic calming, et cetera. All of which VTrans looked at and said, you'll never get any of this if there are highways, because our job is to move 20,000 vehicles a day from exit 12 to Essex Junction. So, the VTrans party line on state highways running through downtowns is, if you want to control it, you got to take it over. Taking it over costs a municipality about $35,000 a mile, and VTrans only reimburses about $11,000 a mile, or the state of Vermont. So it's a losing proposition financially for towns. This pilot study is about attempting to come up with a real world cost for towns to take over state highways. That's a good thing, especially if it leads to a policy change. The other part is it could lead to maybe saying back to VTrans, maybe you guys could be more flexible about how these roads are configured when they go through a growth center or a village center or a downtown.
And get yourself in line with the state energy plan.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, 90 by 50, right?
So, a lot of potential benefit for the town to participate in that pilot, even if we don't take over those roads to the tune of, $200,000 a year next year. At least getting the right dollar amount somewhere in the system And maybe getting some flexibility on how those roads are configured, both would be beneficial, and, you know, speaks to some of what we talked about in the vision plan process about dealing with those state highways going through the middle of Taft Corners. So we've got a lot of follow-up work on our plates. Sewer allocation ordinance, and supporting the creation of new housing options in Taft Corners with appropriate amounts of sewer capacity is another one we're going to need to look at. That's more of an internal project. But just so you know, if you're talking to friends who say, hey, I read something about this form-based code and you're just letting people build taller buildings, you all know there's a lot more to the story than that. And these are just a couple of other things that add to that story about truly achieving that community vision for Taft Corners. So fun stuff to work on for us.
Plus inclusionary zoning.
Plus we have housing work happening. So VHFA, Vermont Housing Finance Association Agency is conducting the housing needs assessment for the town right now. We did a contract with them. We expect to see a draft of that right around the turn of the new year, which could inform additional policies related to affordable housing, including possibly requiring the provision of affordable units in new residential projects of a certain size in Williston. So, you know, when we had people saying, hey, what about housing? What about environmental quality? What about the roads? We really, and you really did hear all of that, and you're seeing it in our work plan.
Yeah.
So we want to get out and communicate that in our planners corner as well.
Absolutely.
You know, that there's a lot of potential here and a lot of ways to leverage the land use work that's been done with this other infrastructure, regulatory, and funding work, and we're on it. And will be for some time.
That's awesome.
Okay.
If there's a way to like have a list of those somewhere central, that would be so helpful, because I was kicking myself for not starting to write them down, and then I realized that wasn't going to be much help anyway. So
No, this will take the form of a follow-up memo to the select board. I wanted to give them a meeting or two of not seeing me.
yes,
And
understandable.
those projects will be hot linked in the memo so that folks can keep up with them as we go forward.
Questions for Matt on any of those?
So as you start working more with the state and V-Trans, et cetera, is there any way, for instance, to get them to think about like speed limits on different parts of their road systems that go through Williston? I know that they are sort of impervious to that, but one of my concerns is that, for instance, down on Sucker Hollow, where the trail easement comes through, the speed, the miles per hour speed there is really fast. There's also a passing lane right there. People coming in and out of that, it's dangerous. It's been dangerous for the last 50 years. It's not getting any less dangerous.
But it's even more dangerous when there are cars parked on the road because the parking lot's not big enough and there's no way to expand it.
So, you know, I mean, how do you bring that up to the V-Trans? I've talked to them before and it didn't seem to go anywhere.
Well, we can bring it up. Usually, you know, it's more when there is some sort of a study underway where we can identify those local concerns, and to use their terminology. I am wondering with the parking lot, how frequent are you observing an overcapacity state at that parking lot? I can pass that on to Simon.
I don't know, because I don't go down there that often, but I keep hearing from our neighbors there to the south that it happens quite often, especially on, you know, peak foliage times of the year, et cetera, you know, beautiful fall days, it gets slammed.
So it's great to know people are accessing it, but encourage that neighbor to reach out to Simon Miles in our office.
Yeah.
All right.
Because we haven't done a lot of looking at volumes there in some time, and it's good to know if we need to start thinking about something more.
It's another one of those areas in town where there's a steep hill
Mhm.
and there's a lot of traffic coming in and out.
Yeah.
And it's a potential for something really bad to happen.
Yeah, it's actually something that's been on my mind is we may need to kind of think about the transportation recreation interfaces almost more comprehensively. Because I've thought a lot, I ride my bike a lot out on South Road, and people coming on mountain bikes out of Mud Pond,
Yes,
you come up that lip onto South Road, and there is like, you can't see the cars until you're basically out. Plus, the cars can't see you until like the very last second, and there's no warning at all that there might be bikes popping out of the woods
so
all of a sudden.
I've got great news for you on some of that front.
Okay.
We're looking at a project to build trail access parallel to South Road from the parking lot to the crossing over to the country park.
Oh, okay,
So there, we've determined that there's not a problem. There's not a barrier to doing that in the conservation easement on the, let me get my directions, the west side of
Right.
South Road. And that there is physical space that's not wet, where we could have an access trail parallel to South Road so that people would just come make the crossing and not have to come out on the road and
Okay.
ride down to the
but
trail.
then the crossing also needs to be really well marked.
That may be a push button beacon at some point.
Yeah,
It would have to be solar, I think, in that location, but
right, yeah,
it
but
would
just,
probably work.
I mean,
most of the
literally
summer.
even a sign saying that there might be
Yeah.
bikes. Yeah, but then thinking about like the, you know, there's a lot of these kind of points of potential
Right.
friction
Oh, yeah, yeah.
between parking for recreational needs and
Right.
transportation, just people on a mission, you
And the
know,
Sucker Hollow gets compounded because it is Route 2A, it's a state highway, and
and the speeds are high, yep,
And
and
it is 50 there, but it's, people travel through there more like 60.
it is.
And it
very
is
fast.
blind. If you're coming out of that parking lot, it's blind.
Mhm, yeah.
They can't
Yeah.
see you.
Okay, good to know. We will try to keep that in mind. Chapin, do you have a comment?
Yes, I did. I realize this is a little bit in the weeds, but I just wanted to second Mr. Boomhauer's comment about the safety getting in and out of Sucker Brook Trail parking area. It is a dangerous place, and it's partly dangerous because of the lack of, it's as you're driving on Route 2A, it's hard to see the turn until you're right there. And I think when we pass this on to Simon, it might, about capacity, we might also mention if it could be made easier for people to see the sign, or maybe a bigger sign, or change how the sign is aligned. That would be helpful. And I also just wanted to comment that as you started talking about state highway speed limits, I'm actually pretty okay with them everywhere else in town on Route 2 and 2A. I can't think of another place that I worry about as much as that one place going down that hill. Thanks.
All right. Thank you all for that. Yeah, Emily is doing her fabulous
Street view action.
street view. Yeah, super helpful. So we were having such a great conversation that we're now behind our schedule, but I think that's not a big deal. We have a number of notices from neighboring jurisdictions, specifically Richmond. You want to give us the highlights?
Sure.
Of this very large set of,
Yeah, so what happened with Richmond is they started with one of these really two amendments, and then they kind of warned another one that sort of overlapped. But this is essentially about the part of Richmond that surrounds the Main Street downtown area and goes up the corridor toward the middle school and out along Route 2. And it appeared to me that they were looking at, you know, some sort of a little more mixed use, a little more sort of multifamily housing allowance in this district. And I'm just looking at, so they talk about residential compatible commercial uses.
That's the
last one.
yeah, the last
So
one
you
is
can
the
see
map,
where we're
which is
talking about.
probably the easiest thing to see.
And yeah, there's a little bit over by Stone Corral on the other side there too.
Yeah.
So buildings that are live work, this is all an area that's quite, I'll walkable to the downtown. It's all served by municipal water and sewer. And so they're talking about multifamily dwelling up to 4 units, medical offices, professional services, arts and crafts studio. These would all be added allowed uses. They identify what they call some adaptive uses. In other words, most of these were built as single family homes and could be adapted to do more things. Fitness facility, laundromat, medical, education, childcare, all sort of very, if there's a parallel to what we're doing in Williston, it's mostly like what we're looking at more here in the village of being more flexible around multifamily and commercial, and even buildings that have both commercial and residential uses in them. You'll also note, if you get into the red line bylaw, this is the village residential commercial district markup document. They're talking about screening and headlights and, dealing with a commercial driveway next to a home, and all of those things that I think we've seen a little bit of discussion on here in the village as well. All of that said, the purpose for the Williston Planning Commission to be notified of this is so it can comment if it thinks there's anything impactful or detrimental to the town of Williston based on what Richmond's doing here. My takeaway was that no, there's not. It's not going to hurt Williston at all. It's a good thing, and I wouldn't have any comment for Richmond on this.
My only reaction looking at this was a little bit of surprise at how much of their, particularly near the river, how much of that flooded in the tropical storm Irene. I'm kind of surprised they're allocating some of that for building. I know like a lot of Esplanade Street was underwater and all the way up there. So yeah, I don't know if they've talked to the state climatologist at all, but that might be something to consider, but ours is not to.
Well, one takeaway from one of the conference sessions from the conference Emily and I was at is that we understand in Vermont that there's tension between wanting to support our traditional downtowns and the fact that many of them are in flood zones and river corridors. And, looking at where supporting those downtowns means having things in flood zones, but having those structures made resilient.
Yes.
So, Emily lives in Waterbury. So,
Right.
very, very, very aware both of the impacts of flooding and all of the responses Waterbury's had to make its development standards
Right.
to that the next time. And so, if we want to continue to have the quote from the 1970s capability and development plan, Vermont was compact centers surrounded by a rural landscape. Many of those compact centers are in places like this. And so then I think you start to balance like, well, can the building be made in a way that it can flood underneath it? Or is this place just like so susceptible that we really should just get out?
Right.
And that's just gonna keep, that and climate migration are the two biggest things Vermont's gonna experience as it relates to climate.
Well, collapse of the ski industry, maybe. Yes, Chapin, go ahead.
One really minor thing, which is if you go to Richmond and you head down across the railroad tracks on the left before the police station and all is a new residential building. I think it's low income housing, fairly close to railroad tracks. And if you look in the driveway behind it is a solar canopy parking area, which I think is very much like what I hope we wind up with behind the town hall with our expanded parking. So just something to take a look at. And then I didn't get anything about, reading through these documents, I didn't glean anything that would affect us, but I did wonder, because I got lost I couldn't follow all the details, just if there was anything that informed us, like we should emulate it in any way. And I leave that up to staff.
Yeah, that was the question I had too. Is like, are there lessons we can learn, particularly for the village, from some of their screening, commercial, residential, abutting properties, those kinds of things.
My takeaway was that a lot of that is more discretionary and up to the DRB in the Richmond draft. And we're being quite a bit more prescriptive in the Williston draft.
Okay.
And that's a choice.
Yeah.
Style, capacity of the community to do things. And also just the personality of the community. A lot of communities like to leave more up to the DRB and some communities like to say, no, I really, in the case of our village draft, I want a picture of what this is gonna look like, that the applicant has to follow. So
Right.
I think that was the major distinction that I took, but I thought, I was just interested that, gosh, it looks like they're thinking about a lot of the same things we're thinking about.
Okay, that's helpful. Any other comments or questions about the Richmond notices? All right. So at the end of our basic agenda, we talked about our tentative, well, no, it's not tentative, right? We are having a community
Oh, yeah, I guess it's
meeting.
real. Yeah, it's happening.
No longer tentative. And then we will hope to have the capital budget on December 6th. And the mobility hub feasibility study update. Okay, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Should know a little more about that.
All right. Go ahead, Chapin.
Some of us drafted our annual report draft, and we kind of let that go by the wayside with all what was going on. We tried to get it through at the end of August. And I think we were consumed by form-based code and from the select board. And so where does that stand? I think the draft that Shayla and I had looked at was in your hands, Megan, for review
And
next.
Mea culpa, that was my fault. I too got distracted by other things. So I will have a look at your draft, and I apologize. And we will bring that in maybe to the second part of November 15th or December 6th.
Yeah, that can work.
Okay.
15th or December 6th.
Yeah, we can circulate it ahead so people have that chance to read it.
Yeah. that
It's
sounds
short,
good.
right? Two
Yeah, it
pages,
has-
right?
Yeah.
One
One
page. I
page,
think.
one
Yeah.
page.
It should be shorter than what we drafted. It's actually, at the last time I put it in 3 different versions. One, because I didn't want to be too dry. I tried one that was more folksy. Anyway, all of them were too long.
Okay, I will have a look at it and maybe take my editorial eye to it and see if I can get it down to one page as well. Thank you for reminding me of that, and I apologize again for letting it slide. Good. Any other comments, or do you folks have any other issues you'd like to share?
No, not at this time. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks for coming along.
Mhm.
We like having public visitors. Great. All right. Anything else from you guys?
Not right now,
All
no.
right. Awesome. Reclaiming our time.
Please.
As Maxine Waters says. So I'll take a motion to adjourn then.
I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you, Shayla. Second
Second.
from Jason. I think we can assume everybody is in favor, and have a great next couple weeks. We'll see you the 15th.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Good night.